Welcome back to the bench, powered by Wowhead. We are on episode 10. Growl and Squishy both trapped in Broodtwister prison. Who could have possibly have predicted this? Them and 750-ish more guilds stuck on that big-ass worm. Growl, welcome.
That's me. That is me. Yeah, our guild. So we're actually stuck on Broodtwister, and we haven't even pulled it yet. We saw that boss on the first week. We cleared up the first 4 bosses, and then we saw that boss, and we're like, nope. So instead, we just took our raid team, we went into 2 different raids, and we said, we're doing splits on Mythic.
Wait.
And so we cleared the first 4 bosses twice instead of fighting Broodtwister. And now someone has the brilliant idea of saying, hey, let's raid Monday night, and we'll just try Broodtwister on one of our splits. So that's what I'm in for after this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm enjoying the last remaining sane moments of my night with you two. Squishy, how are you guys doing?
I've lost my sanity from like 3 nights of Broodtwister prog, but going in with the split, I feel like I'd lose all of it instantly.
They're trying to split the boss. I love that. That goes so hard, actually.
Do you have 2 blood decays in that split?
Maybe. No, I think there's a brewmaster in there. Something.
God help you.
Dude,
God help you.
Squishy, I saw this tweet that you tweeted out earlier where there seems to be a lot of invisible swirlies on this boss that like to kill all of your melee. What's going on here?
Yeah. Last night...
Look at this guy's death. He just dies to air.
Squirrel just dies. If you actually look close of it, you can see the little projectile in the air fall on the spot, on the ground, but the ground just isn't marked. And so I tweeted this, and I've gotten a couple more pings from people who have clips.
Oh my god.
Swirlies just not showing up on the ground. And considering these things do like half your health and damage, this has to be one of the most frustrating mechanics of all time right now.
Why is it?
It's so funny because you have these swirlies, and like, okay, as a healer, when I have a DPS and my team says, "Oh, I'm a melee DPS," I wasn't in that. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, buddy." And you know, generally that's the case, is they stood right in it. But seeing swirlies that melee DPS actually can't see, I mean, there's no hope for us. This is a very big concern with how bad the visibility already is on this boss.
Dude, can they also fix the swirlies on last boss of Misatirna Scythe while they're at it? Like, invisible puddles...
No, maybe the next time that dungeon comes back.
Okay, I guess it's not even the fact that they're invisible puddles, although that is obnoxious. It's also the fact that they insta-tick you and, like, kill you.
Dude, they insta-tick you for, like, half your health. It is so much damage.
Okay, so what do we have for the show today? We're going to be kind of talking about, like, you know, how prog has been going, the gearing process, just general Mythic Plus stuff. Additionally, we have a mystery guest on that you might or might not be able to tell who it is via the title. We haven't determined what we're going to be titling this video yet, but there's a mystery guest on that we're going to be talking about the raid with. How has prog been going for you guys? Like, is it, like, does this raid just need, like, massive nerfs? This seems, like, insane.
Well, we're farming a lot of trash.
That is stupid, by the way.
I think we've gone 7 or 8 BOEs in like 8 runs or like 9 runs or something like that. So we've gotten quite a lot of loot from just, you know, farming trash, which is odd to say the least. But Broodtwister, like, is being a wall like for many other guilds. So the difficulty curve of this raid is insane. I mean, the first 4 are insanely easy, so much so that, as Growl has pointed out, you can split it and get extra loot. Then you just run into a brick wall that needs 2 blood decays and a bunch of, you know, huge comp restrictions and big AoE DPS and coordination and dodging invisible things that you can't see. And then it's just bricked a lot of guilds. And last week, all they did was just kind of nerf the DPS check on the ads a little, which helped. But it really feels like they need to do more at this point.
Oh, yeah, because we kind of talked about it last week when we were doing our podcast episode, like, what should they do to those fights? They didn't nerf Nexus Princess at all. What did they do to Broodtwister? All right, hold
on. They reduced the ad health on the parasites and the big spiders.
I found it, yeah. Like, these are good things, right? These are good nerfs, all things considered.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with them. But there's still a lot of things that can just instantly wipe you if you miss a single egg. So on Mythic difficulty, 8 people get marked with the egg breakers. And a lot of the time you have to hit 2 eggs simultaneously. So if one person misses an egg out of the 8 every time, you just instantly wipe. There's no recovery. You just go again. Then, of course, there's the swirlies that deal half your health. Especially in melee, they overlap a lot of times. So if you stand in 1, you stand in 2 or 3, you just instantly die. And sometimes when you're trying to break the egg, the swirly lands on you and you die.
Yeah.
Then, you need to grip the parasites in. So you need 2 blood decays, you need a lot of AoE DPS, you need a CC rotation to stun the parasites so they don't infest. Then you need a kick rotation, you need to place down markers in the right spots. It's just a very, very high level boss that suddenly just showed up out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because they increased the gear progression throughout Mythic. They added Mythic level gear and the crests in the last expansion, and they kind of expanded that to let people go a little bit higher. On top of that, they added this stacking raid buff or whatever, and eventually people will get stronger to make the bosses feel easier. However, the first 4 bosses were so easy, and already you run into a wall at boss 5 that it feels kind of weird, right? It's like you're just at this boss and you're just like, what do we do? And my raid prog has actually been great, but that's because we're kicking the can and I haven't pulled Broodtwister yet. So the first 4 bosses I thought for any cutting edge guild or even non-cutting edge guild, I think are reasonably cool. There's kind of a lot of movement in some of the bosses that gets a little bit annoying. I think a lot of classes don't really like running around on RShaman and doing circles around the boss or whatever. But for the most part, the mechanics are pretty reasonable. I don't know. I've been enjoying the raid, but I think anybody who's going into Mythic is up for a time. And I don't. One thing I'm not really sure that I'm worried about that's going to happen, and maybe even soon people will know if this happens, is what sorts of tuning is about to happen in week 2. I worry that they specifically didn't change things and didn't want to mess with the race to world first. The problem is they're messing with everybody else now. If they come in, notably Prez Evoker is just insane. In the previous episodes I talked about Dispriest, and Dispriest is so good, but Prez is just so much better that you can't even play Dispriest. And so I kind of wonder what's Blizzard gonna do here with the tuning of the bosses and the tuning of the classes. If they just slap a tuning change and do all these nerfs in the middle of everybody's prog, it's gonna feel really, really weird. I understand not wanting to mess with the race a little bit, but every other guild is making these adjustments and who can play Prez? How do we do this? We need 2 blood decays. We're all figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
And then if we go all through this and then they, you said 700 whatever guilds, it's going to be annoying.
Yeah, 750 guilds or something like that. I mean, Max even tweeted out, "Dear God, I hope they nerf this raid before normal Mythic guilds get to these bosses. I'm not trying to get yelled at." And I mean, dude, this raid is generationally hard. This raid looks just absolutely nuclear. And I think that there's also this issue that you kind of talked about where it's so Preservation Evoker is blowing every other healer out of the water to the point where it's nearly impossible to play the other healers. But it's so much better, and people started re-rolling to it, that nerfing it is also really bad. Should it be this strong? Absolutely not. But also, people started re-rolling to it, and it's probably 2 weeks too late to be looking to nerf it. So do you just buff all the rest of the shit? What are you really supposed to do about HPS whenever Prez is this far ahead? Prez should not be this far ahead, but to give them an appropriate nerf would, I think, really mess with a lot of the guilds that are trying to prog the raid right now. This is absurd. I don't think I've ever seen this much. It is hundreds of thousands of HPS more than the rest of the field.
I remember with Farak, the world first Farak was nerfed very shortly after that. They took it from, I think, wasn't it 18 blaze lines down to 12 or something like that?
Oh yeah,
it was a pretty big nerf in the number of blaze lines relatively quickly. I hope they do something similar for basically at least a couple of the bosses here. In addition to, I think they just go in and class tune and adjust the bosses accordingly. Kaiveza is a very high damage fight, along with the last 2, obviously. They can just kind of slap those nerfs in now that the top 3 guilds are done. Go in and just take down Prez a notch, bring down the damage of all those encounters so that people don't feel forced to do it. And if you want to keep running Prez, that's fine, but the damage is going to compensate, so you don't need to have those preservations. Because I think maintaining this 2 times preservation thing, it's insane.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think they might also need to do a trinket pass.
I would. Wait, what? Oh, you're talking about like Mad Queens and Spy Masters, or what?
I think Spy Masters is kind of meta-defining with how insane it is right now. So much so that you notice that on the last couple bosses, you just lusted at the end. Actually, for most of the bosses except for Kaveza, you just lust at the end now because it lines up with all your casters getting a 40 stack of Spy Masters.
Ooh.
So
mathematically, it's actually better to lust on pull with all of your offensive CDs, but the problem is like on the end of the fight. So the end of Queen Ansurek, it was like the most insane overlap you've ever seen. On Silken Court, it was 2 targets taking 100% increased damage, and then Broodtwister, it was the triple worm overlap, right? But it opened up the opportunity to be able to lust at the end, whereas in the past that would almost never be the case.
Yeah, I mean, if you can line up all your cooldowns midway through the fight to hit a Spy Master's window and have all your cooldowns like on a 6, like Broodtwister's a 6/15 lust, so that hits your 2s and your 3s, and your potion again, like you 100% do that. Like I don't know that they should nerf Spy Masters, but my god, is that defined this meta in my opinion. In addition to, I think there's one trinket from Delves. It's the candle.
Oh yeah, Candle Confidant. What a dumbass trinket, by the way.
We all. I mean, come on. We knew that was coming.
Like
we
that trinket is insane.
Trinket from Vault was coming.
Seg killed it.
Delve
killed
up.
Queen Ansurek with that trinket from Delves.
Yep, the Candle Confidant. Dude, THD's Candle Confidant in the last phase of Nexus Princess was like 30% of his damage or something fucking stupid. Like, absolutely bananas.
So sick.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I think nerfing items is rough. It's a rough topic. I mean, we don't need to get too far into it, but I agree that it's super messy, but like, holy crap, does it feel bad when stuff gets changed? Like, they have to be really careful, right? Like, dude, people like buy it off of other people in the raid, which I guess like screw those people anyway. You know, people do splits and like trade it and you plan stuff out. Like, you take it out of your vault. Like, imagine, you know, it's just such a nerfing items. I have like a bitter taste in my mouth from different times in games when I get items or I work hard to get items and then they nerf stuff. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I get it. I think this if there's a time to do it, they just do a big sweeping pass to the entire game right now. Not the race is over.
Yeah, I mean,
but we'll see what happens.
I would be down for them to do a sweeping pass. Okay, so what do you
on the topic of tuning as well? What do you guys? Do you want to talk about M+ next, or you guys got more? I mean, we're all kind of actually. Tettles, how's your raid experience gone this tier?
Fine. I think my raid experience has been one in which I tried to pug Queen Ansurek. I'm like, this is impossible. I leave the raid. I will do some of the bosses in a group. Now, some of my friends who are cutting edge level raiders want to start doing heroic runs, and this is very good for me. And then in addition to that, we're going to be killing the first 2 bosses of Mythic as well. So don't mind if I do get a little bit of loot.
If you do 2, might as well do 3.
Well, we're going to kill as many as we can. If we can, within reason, kill 4, we'll kill 4. But we're also not going to spend more than like 2 hours doing this entire thing, so I don't care that much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, if you kill that many, you might as well trash farm at that point. It's the easiest.
Absolutely
easiest
not. I'm not trash farming, man. I got better shit to do, like nothing, like lay in my bed.
No. Trash farm is great.
Sleep
trash
some
farm
more.
is great. You say that, but wait till you see the gear that people show up with when they got 6 myth track items next week and keys, and you're just gonna be like, man,
it's okay. I'm a lizard, man. I'm just here to buff them, anyways. Dude,
that is true.
I don't have my 4 set yet.
Wait, huh?
I know.
Well, life is tough, man.
It's okay. I'll get it later.
I'm pretty sure Jangby's got his 4 set at this point.
I don't know, man. Low roll, whatever. Doesn't matter. All right. I think that we've discussed the raid and like random tuning enough. I think it's time to hop into the interview with Liquid Sanghelios. All
right, and coming off of the USA win of the Race to World First, we have a sick interview today. Live from the Alienware training facility, we have the Moonkin Overlord turned Evoker Mastermind, MDI global finalist, multiple Race to World First winner, and most importantly, the World First wielder of the Evoker Legendary and Dragonflight. He is the Delve Specialist. He is a mount collector. I've heard he's the master of lore. We have Liquid Sanghelios. Thank you so much for joining us today, friend.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Would you consider that an appropriate introduction, Sang?
Yeah, that was pretty accurate. Everything there, just about. Maybe
Dude.
missing a few things.
How does it feel? Like, I mean, you guys were grinding for this race, and I mean, I think that it would be an understatement to say that you guys absolutely played your asses off this tier, especially whenever you were looking at like the progression relative to the other guilds and whatnot. You guys just completely owned.
Yeah, we definitely were playing crazy the entire time. We did better throughout the entire race at all points. You know, as simple as doing splits, re-clears, and then just killing bosses like progression bosses, easy bosses, and the hard bosses. We just did amazing on like everything basically this race.
Yeah, I think for us plebs, like watching back, now that the race is over, we can see that. But like, how was your guys' mental thinking, like going through it? Like, were you guys feeling that the whole way? You were just like, yeah, our prep was good, we're killing bosses. Was there ever any uncertainty at certain points, or were you guys just in the zone, sort of locked in the whole way?
I'd definitely say there's definitely times of uncertainty with, getting to a boss. A lot of time spent in strategizing and generally always like knowing that, especially when we're live and like strategizing and we're reaching bosses first, like we know that like our competition is just gonna have that extra information. And we expect them to like always catch up, like be a little faster at catching up just because they don't have to take the time to pull the boss and figure things out more than not, and like they can just kind of like have a basis to like try walking the boss initially. So it was like always like there's a lot of like uncertainty, and like you get to like a boss like Kaveza, you get to see like its HP and stuff, and almost like is it even killable sometimes. Like there's definitely times like that where like there's a lot of bosses that were is this dying this reset? It's gonna be really tight. And just there's definitely a clear like we're gonna hit a wall, and then it'll be an even playing field, and then from there it's like how do you get past that, time wise, and
Well,
who does it faster.
well, this time around, it felt like you guys were just in the lead the entire time for the most part. So how did that feel? I think there was only like one point when Echo kind of was close to you, and then you guys just kept the lead the entire time.
I mean, often it was kind of a surprise to progress a boss and then go to bed and wake up, and they're not even ahead of us, because we kind of expect like usually they're slightly ahead when we wake up, and then we pass them, and it's like that kind of happens a lot. But that just did not happen at all this time. We literally wake up, have them not even be ahead of us, and just think that like we have nothing to really like. Maybe we like watch their one of their best pulls just to see if there's like anything small that they maybe did better. Maybe we'll change like one small thing that they do better, and then we'll just do our own thing because there's not much else to really learn since there's they're not ahead. So it was a good. It was like surprising, but also made us feel like we're just it's just our game to lose.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, one thing I did want to talk about. I guess we kind of got right into the raid right away, but
Oh yeah.
I kind of want to know, since I've never like been to one of these events, maybe Tettles can add in too after, but like, can you take us through what the environment is like? So like when you first get there, your first day or two, like even before the raid is out, and maybe just like some of the outside stuff, what is it like? Like, where do you guys stay? Who's with you? Like all the, any fun stuff that you guys do outside of the game, or what is the vibe like in sort of the pre race the world first, everybody meet up place?
I mean, there's definitely like I don't know. There's like a mix of like crunch time sometimes. So, we're all getting here. We all came in like in the middle of heroic splits, so it was like kind of very time crunch. Like, oh, get the flight, get set up, and just straight back into the split raids. Because you had to do, you got to get them done. There's a lot of raids that had to be done in kind of a time. I mean, that's kind of like what happened with just our decision to have most of the flights here like during that heroic week. I think the Europeans have had they got to fly like earlier because their flights are generally longer, so they flew in before heroic week. But after like I'd say like maybe around the maintenance window is definitely just a lot of like hanging out, just kind of eating together, breakfast, all the food is amazing, talking about all the stuff, and it's generally like it's just a very good vibe the entire time.
I have a question. You kind of brought up Heroic Week a little bit there. How did you feel about Heroic Week actually returning? Because it was something that I think that most people were like super happy to see Heroic Week come back because it would be like more interesting for the raid. But then the Race World First Guilds just decided, you know what, with Heroic Week back, what if we did 16 splits? Like, what even? Like, was it even fun for you guys to do that many splits? That seems brutal.
Like Heroic Week was just essentially, yeah, it was like just more time to do more splits, and it's still like it didn't at all mitigate the fact of just having to still do splits on the Mythic Week. There was still just like a lot of time spent doing that because there's just like so much gear to be had. So in a sense, it's just like more. It's just more time to do splits, and it's like the more time they add, the more you're gonna try to take advantage of it. So it really didn't. It didn't really feel like it changed much other than just like more time spent doing splits. That's like all it was. So I don't think it's I don't think it's really better
Do you
in any way.
do you prefer no Heroic Week then?
Uh, it's hard to say that because it just like depends on how much gear you really need to do the raid. Obviously, you just get as much gear as you can. It saves you time progressing. There's no reason to progress like anything when there's potential like gear upgrades you can get. And I think both, like preference wise, like I would say like a heroic week really doesn't do anything. It's just like I'd prefer probably not. Obviously, I would love to splits to not be just a thing that's going to happen, but
Mm-hmm.
in a sense,
Sorry
I guess
to
less time spent doing it is nice.
sorry to butt in, but I have kind of a theory question that I've been joking around a little bit. What do you think? How would you feel about an expansion where everything is released on day one and there's no time gating?
Holy
So basically,
shit.
day one, you're level 70. The mythic raid is out. There's no cap on crests or anything. Do you think that would be like fun? Do you think it'd be wild? Maybe like what do you think the Race World First would be like in a summary or whatever? If that
I
was the case.
mean, it definitely would be wild because you'd have to account like time spent leveling characters. You'd be like, oh, how much time do you spend leveling more characters to get more gear versus progression time? And it's like theoretically, like if I mean, I guess you'd have to like know how difficult the raid, which you get a lot of information on how difficult stuff is from other people too, like a lot of times. So, while we're doing splits and stuff or gearing up, like other people like go in the raid and we'll kind of figure out like, where's the difficulty? Is this boss a one-shot boss? Is this boss like a 5-shot boss? And then where's like the clear wall? So like I think in a sense it would be I think you would it'd be wild in that you would, level up characters and then like someone surely goes in the raid and how much gear do you actually need to kill bosses in there? And from there, you could maybe make a guess on like, is it worth gearing up 100 characters to gear or leveling and gearing? That takes a lot of time. That would be crazy.
Yeah. Kind of on like that note, people talk about like leveling up characters for more splits, and like pre-planning for boss fights. What kind of like other behind the scenes prep do you guys do? I know Max has mentioned like you do DPS testing on dummies. Is there anything else like behind the scenes that you guys do that may not be as visible to the general public?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, yeah, there's our own damage testing. There's also a lot of times that we will, especially for raid testing, um, we do our own raid testing things, but we also like look at any public log and like, gather all the data of like all the public logs of raid testings just to see like where classes stand in terms of that, like balance wise. And also just, if there's any, it doesn't really happen often, but like any public footage of like raid testing that got like pretty far. And then outside of I want to say it's like, I mean, there definitely is just a lot of prep behind the scenes. Like, you got people like watching any guild for any information when it comes to just like pre-expansion stuff, such as, you know, how to do renown, whatever. Like, if there's anything funny that goes on, or any more efficient way, like PvP, when that happens, you know, we had to kind of pivot to doing that. We had a lot of people that kind of like monitor everything that goes on.
Yeah. Okay. How do you guys test Aug Evoker during your guys? Like, obviously, you can do it during raid testing and maybe get a little bit of data on it. But like, whenever you're doing dummy testing and whatnot, like, how do you actually check and see and verify that Aug Evoker isn't just completely garbage? Because if you look at like Warcraft log stats, it looks like it's the worst spec in the game by a country mile, but that doesn't seem to necessarily be true. Like, how do you guys even test?
Yeah, so it's quite the bare bones method of doing it. You simply have to do testing without it, and then plug in the Aug Evoker and see how much the raid DPS goes up or down based on like just that. Like, you just have to do the numbers yourself, because logs have generally been not good at knowing exactly where Aug Evoker stands.
Okay.
So just gotta do it the hard way, basically.
Do you think like the hard way testing is good for, let's say, just like random civilians or just like people who are just playing the game? Like, do you think it helps you like learn your class, or like to like actually go out and test things and like do damage tests on dummies? Or do you think most people are better suited just like follow a guide and not worry about it unless they find it fun?
I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of people out there that don't. Well, they like sorry, especially like even on like PTR beta tests. Like, I mean, I see plenty of people that just go out there and just like hitting training dummies out like out there. So there's definitely a lot of people that do love just doing their own thing, or just playing around with their spec on a PTR beta, that are, you know, not high end raiders. They just do their own thing. And I'm sure there's also people that look at guides and just follow that going into new content when that comes out. So I think it's just both.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's good to kind of like just see how you learn. But yeah, I guess it's kind of hard not to segue into the raid at this point. One thing that I've always noticed that I kind of want to talk about or maybe get some insight on is I'm always impressed that you guys just walk into bosses and just like one shot these early bosses. Like, for instance, RShaman or whatever. Like, not that these are difficult, but that you know, most people would need more time at least to like see what sort of bad overlaps there are, like, you know, to visibly like learn what's going on. How much work like goes into the prep for sort of like the early easy bosses? Is it a lot, or like, and if there's any secret stuff, obviously you don't have to share, but or do you just feel like it's just, you know, a skill diff and you guys are just that more connected and organized that you guys just go into those early bosses and YOLO it?
Yeah, we're just better than everybody else.
I mean, I actually think it kind of is just a skill diff. Like, we definitely don't spend like a lot of time like thinking about first boss, second boss, third stuff. Like, sure, we obviously those raid testings are like happen, and we do raid tests when they show up. But generally, we know, at least expect, that there's never a super early wall for like the first two bosses were like, yeah, okay, like you kind of get the idea. They're not going to be that crazy. I know, like the first boss, we spent like even quite a lot of just like strategizing. I remember it was like Zekvir, just because that boss like early on had like that was the first boss that had like an instant like raid wipe mechanic with, you know, putting the clones too close that just like instantly killed you.
Oh
That
yeah.
was kind of like, it's kind of like actually like complex, and like, you know, private aura having to spread a mechanic and instantly wiping if you fail. So that was like one of those cases of like, okay, we kind of had to like put a lot of strategy in this, and then they ended up like making a change where it's not a insta wipe if you stack them too close. It's just more raid damage. And then after we go in, I think we even, you know, we failed the mechanic that would have wiped us in the previous version, but, you know, you just kind of overpower it because it's not too crazy anymore. And so like the first three bosses became that, and then RShaman was RShaman was quite a funny experience. So that was like, we knew like the mechanics and everything, but the boss was just entirely different with its platform sequence. from testing. And so the entirety of that boss was just YOLO'd almost. Like all of our strat just almost went out the window, and we just somehow still one shot the boss.
It's
It
actually
was-
so impressive. That's so cool.
Yeah.
it was definitely a case of like, we just made it work, stayed alive. We did hit the little enrage on it, I guess, but it wasn't a kill, or it didn't kill us, so we ended up just still killing it. It was quite a fun movie.
Kind of talking about some of the comp stuff that we've seen. I think this is actually probably the most diverse comp that we've seen this tier, where 4 out of the 8 bosses ended up having to get like heavily comp stacked for one reason or another, and so then you're heavily incentivized to bring basically the best comp for each and every single boss. I think that we saw 29 specs used by like race world first guilds and kills. I think that like the Dratnos suite that you can see on the screen here, like the only difference is like now Prod Paladin was actually used, and like Fire Mage and Shadow Priest was seen at various points. But like, it seems like some stuff is so imbalanced at times, like Frost DK and Enhancement Shaman doing 20% more damage than some specs on AoE, but then you just like don't see them on single target fights like Nexus Princess. I mean, is this tier like tuned really well, or is it just a situation where AoE versus single target is like so different that some of the specs like really shine, and having this class stack for specific fights like makes more like diverse comps from a boss to boss like a more of a thing?
I think it's a combination of the fact that the last 4 bosses were so tightly tuned, and also have very different profiles like of a boss, like Broodtwister being a very heavy ad fight and having a lot of health, Kaiveza being pure single target, Silken Court being a council 2-target boss, and then obviously last boss being last boss shenanigans. Like 4 different, very different like fight styles, and they were extremely tuned high. So in a situation where you had to bring the best classes at doing certain things on each of those fights, and there's definitely not a lot of like super one trick specs. Like there's definitely a couple classes that are good at like both, but you ended up just like not necessarily, like those aren't the best specs at like specific encounters. Like you had to bring like the best like cleave spec for Broodtwister and Silken Core, and then you had to bring the best single target specs for Kaiveza, and like you couldn't really squeak in like specs that weren't ace tier for that. So it's like you had Devastation, which was played a lot. It was very strong single target, but it would have done fine on Broodtwister. Like it does okay damage, but it's not Frost DK level. So but you still need the utility of the spec. So that's where it's like, okay, that's where we played the Aug, because you get the Evoker utility to buff the DKs, and it like insane, like specs that are really, really good just still couldn't play on some of those bosses just because they the fight styles were entirely different between each other.
Do you think that makes specs more balanced whenever some of them are like quite broken, I guess, in that way, but then they're not broken on single target? Or do you think it's more of just a situation of like the min max was so apparent that you just had to like all in on the whatever was the best?
Yeah, when you look at all of the bosses together, it definitely does make the balance there for sure. Obviously, if you were to look at each individual fight, it wouldn't seem balanced at looking at one boss, but in terms of several bosses, it did imagine be balanced. I wouldn't think it's crazy, yeah, to say. I guess it's a weird way of balancing.
It is definitely strange.
I think the big question that everybody, wonders is we saw Devastation Evoker again instead of Aug. I think many people were expecting, 2 Augs, then 4 Augs, like, oh my god, they're going to run so many Aug Evokers this tier. And then, we saw Aug Evoker a couple times, like you mentioned. And then towards the end, we saw the Dev Evoker come out. How did you feel playing Dev again rather than Aug?
Yeah, I mean, Devastation is a very fun spec to play. I always enjoy playing that spec. It's just very mobile, and it just, I don't know, something about the spec is just lovely. It's just a lovely spec.
Wait, you're a Dev enjoyer? Oh my god, that's insane.
I'm very much a Dev enjoyer.
Do you think that without those like buffs, there was those buffs right before the raid came out to Dev, would you have been playing Dev still, or were you kind of going to be an Aug prison?
So it was again another case of the weird thing is, yes, so Devastation got buffed like significantly to be extremely powerful, and with the tuning of these bosses again, it would have been a case of Devastation was like very strong for sure for single targets. So like you played Devastation on the single target boss because it did more damage, like it was more effective damage than Aug, but at the same time, like for example, if Kaveza was so tightly tuned that if Devastation wasn't buffed, like it was, really bad, there's a potential you probably wouldn't have you would have to either play Aug or play no Evoker DPS because like you needed the best like high damage. Aug is like okay damage for sure. It's not ace tier damage though. And again, a lot of these bosses you just needed to bring the ace specs for like all these bosses, and then have like obviously your raid buffs. So like the fact that you're playing like two prez the entire raid, like you kind of already had some of the evoker utility covered by the best healer, but so there was definitely like potential you could have played Aug. Like you definitely would have played Aug if you needed the DPS evoker and Devastation was bad, or you could have played no DPS evokers because you just would have brought like another mage or another frost DK or another warrior. It's like a lot of it was a very sittable spec augmentation for sure.
One thing I definitely have to ask you about, since we have you here, there's going to be a lot of angry evoker enjoyers if I don't try and pick your brain for some sort of strategy. Not to put you on the spot, but is there anything throughout the raid that you maybe, if you would go back, what you would have done differently, whether it's gameplay wise or spec, or anything that you learned throughout the raid where like you would go back in time and tell yourself? And if not, maybe just any sort of like generalized, really basic level tips for the evokers that are going to be going through the raid over the next month or two.
Like me specifically, I mean, I definitely would have. Oh, it's kind of hard to.
Yeah, it was a hard one to not have prepared. Sorry, you could just give a general loading screen tip for the
Loading
evokers if you
screen
want,
tip.
but I definitely have to pick your brain a little bit to try and help out all the evokers who are going to be tuning in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for sure. I wish I got to. I almost like came in the tier like thinking that I'm just gonna be playing augmentation because I mean it's just generally like when do you actually like play devastation? But then like boss is so tightly tuned that like okay you actually have to play like what actually does the most damage. So like I kind of wish I was like maybe a little more be a little more gear decisions because I had to like make a gear decisions like always be able to play aug, but also it became more and more like okay I should play dev like gear for dev, make sure I have like all the optimal gear, and I've definitely like made a few less optimal decisions in terms of like gearing and crafting when it came to like if I'm gonna play dev, like I need to play like I should have geared this or I should have crafted that. There's a little bit of that, but also just getting more gameplay, just general gameplay on bosses like his devastation. Like we played dev on like all the early bosses because Aug has to be optimized to be like good, but um there's definitely a lot more to like think about. Like I could have played like dev on this boss, and I don't know. There's just a lot of like I wish I played the spec a little more. Basically,
Did you even level your moonkins at all, or were you just like all in on Evoker this tier?
I was all in on Evoker. I leveled my druid because I just love leveling one druid, but
Yeah.
that character was just going to be a split character. It was essentially going to be a split character until we talked making more split characters. so then I just like okay, I'll just make even more just evokers because that just happened just randomly.
How many times did you die using deep breath?
Surprisingly, not much actually. The
Giga
fact
Chad.
that the scale commander deep breath like is a lot better than the one you had to just like send it and just hands off keyboard.
We actually saw you one time on Queen Ansurek doing that like mid-air deep breath thing, and you like I died mid-air. You like fell to your death, and you were just like balding that you died.
I mean, yeah, that was like a case of just you just take a lot of damage, and you obviously like can't really press defenses while you're mid thing, but was definitely a funny moment there for sure. Just because I knew that was gonna happen too. The moment I'm like, I'm gonna press his deep breath, be flying around, and I'm just gonna die midair because I just can't press. Like it's just gonna take so much damage. I like to like throw a little heal on myself whenever my health dips low, and I just knew that was gonna happen.
Okay, so let's talk
Yeah.
about raid tuning. I think that this is gonna probably go down as one of the hardest raids of all time, if not the hardest raid of all time. The only other one that could even probably be close is like Sepulcher. How did you end up feeling about the raid tuning in general, where we have basically 4 massive walls in Broodtwister, Nexus Princess, Silken Court, and then obviously Queen Ansurek, all being super hard. The average pull count of this raid is one of the highest of all time, up there with like Tumas Argeris. Like I said earlier, Sepulcher was also very high. Crucible Storm's a bit of... We're gonna ignore that one, but I mean, like, what did you think about just like progging this as like a Race to World first player?
Definitely a lot of hard, insane bosses back to back. It was a case of after like Kaiveza, it was like almost a meme that like it's funny how like the first 4 bosses were like 1 pull, and then you just jumped to straight for 100 plus pull bosses in a row, and it was quite funny to just look at, that. I'm like, this is gonna be a nightmare meme for like any other guild that's not a Race World First. Like you're just gonna get to Rashaman and then just like, okay, just see see you in a couple of weeks when this gets nerfed, because you just can't do anything. Like you just can't progress the raid. So it's funny in that like those in the casual side things, but yeah, it is. It was kind of I wouldn't say exhausting, but like 4 bosses so tightly tuned. Obviously, killing each individual one was exciting. Like a lot more hype. Killing a 50 pull boss, you're like a little excited. Killing a 100 pull boss, you're like jumping for joy. So like all those 4 bosses were the equivalent of like killing Tindril like excitement, obviously. But I would say it was kind of crazy on some of those bosses. Like it definitely felt impossible on like there was the thought of like, is this even a possible DPS check? Like, are we going to be stuck here pulling this boss, waiting for a nerf, and just get this hard stuck there? And definitely that I hate that. That is like a not fun thought, but passion damage is what we call it. Like that kicks in. So like you'll just doing reps on a boss, your DPS just naturally goes up. So like even though like we were getting to Kaiveza, it's like, man, we're like missing like 5-10%. But like, and it's a single target boss, right? It's like, how can you really optimize more? But then just like, couple 50 pulls later, you're just suddenly just still doing like 10% more damage, just because like you are just thinking about every global instinctively and just maximizing your damage, dodging. You're spending less like time thinking about, oh, I gotta dodge this, and you're just doing that naturally, and then you're thinking about, oh, I can like fit in an extra global here and here, and just damage goes up. So it was like, I kind of like think like a lot of people learned. I know Max does this a lot. He learned like he's never gonna think that a boss is impossible, even if it's like mathematically like just doesn't seem correct, because you just gain infinite damage from repetitions, and so it was like 4 bosses back to back like that were quite crazy.
Yeah, I think passion damage is like definitely a thing. Maybe you noticed it in like MDI TGP too, where like the first time you do a key, you're like, doing it at 1 speed, and then as you do it more and more, you're like starting to have to change your cooldowns as packs die faster. One thing with bosses, I mean, we have bosses that are like 1 pull, bosses that are 400 pulls. Where do you like find the most enjoyment or fun out of these sorts of bosses? Like for me personally, I like a boss to have some meat to it and like take, maybe like 30 to 50 pulls, but anything past then is like it's kind of gets a little repetitive for me. Where is like your most fun part during the progress? If it was maybe this raid is a tougher example, but if it was a more like smooth curved raid, or are you just like all in it for the end boss kill?
I'd say like pull counts on bosses are quite strange, because there's like different, like you could have 2 bosses that have high pull count, but they could just be still like totally mean different things. You can have like a boss that you pull and you often wipe in like the first 60 seconds of combat, and you get a high pull count there, and like you kill one of those, it's like feels a little different. Like even in terms like when you progress like a boss where like every wipe is almost like 4 or 5 minutes in, and you have hundreds of pulls. So like Kaiveza's like pull counter is so high because at some point you just like a one death just reset.
Hmm.
And it's only a 6.5 minute encounter, so it's like high pull count, not too exhausting, but like Queen Ansurek being hard, like that encounter is extremely difficult. All 3 phases. Like I think this is like one of the first few encounters that I remember that where like literally every phase of that boss is just so hard, and you do like 100 pulls in like 100 pulls in phase 1, 100 wipes in phase 2, 100 wipes in phase 3, and then like once you finally get like progressing the entire encounter, like 8 minute wipe, 9 minute wipe, 100 of those, it's just like it gets quite exhausting. I'd say like 400 pulls for like a boss. It depends on the boss, like 400 quick wipes or 400 long 9 minute wipe. Like I would say like most long bosses, like 100, like 150 to 200 pulls. That's probably like fine. A short boss like if Kai'Veza you just like instantly died, like that it doesn't seem right to say like 400 pulls, but like I mean, if you're instantly wiping, I guess like if it's a really hard boss, then yeah, I would imagine you rack up a lot of pulls. It has to be a perfect pull, and you just have to instantly wipe if something's wrong.
Okay, let's rank some bosses relative to Queen Ansurek. Fyrakk, harder or easier?
Fyrakk, it would be quite. Sorry, I'm being distracted by Atlas. he's just jumping in on the fucking.
Shout out to Atlas, my Cataclysm raid leader.
Let's go.
I definitely I think Fyrakk is easier than like definitely Queen Ansurek. If that was the comparison, is it Queen Ansurek to Fyrakk?
Yep, Queen Ansurek to Fyrakk. All right, kill Jade into Queen Ansurek.
I didn't really prog like kill Jade in like a sense. Like I mean I've never even hardly know anything of that boss in terms of first. So
what about Uunat then?
Queen Ansurek is harder. Even though I guess it could be biased. I mean we like killed that boss like super late.
Ashara? Is Queen Ansurek the hardest fight that you've ever progged? Is Queen Ansurek, do you think, the hardest end boss, I guess?
Yeah, I guess you could skip it. Yeah, I would say it's probably one of the hardest end bosses I've done for sure.
More than Jailer?
Yes. I mean, I got to spend a lot of time not progging Jailer, so it was. I mean, a Jailer looked hard for sure, but at the same time, I think that there's a lot of improvements we could have done when we were progging Jailer that would have probably made the boss easier, like feel easier. I think at the time it probably felt crazy because I think we've gotten better as a guild since then. And so if we were to like go back there, we'd probably do it a lot easier. It'd feel a lot easier.
Yeah, so on the topic of raid tuning, then you mentioned this is one of the hardest bosses. Do you think item level will and the upcoming percent damage and healing buff will alone make the raid easy enough for the majority of mythic guilds, or do you think like Blizzard needs to come in and like slap things down at this point for people?
For those who don't know, Sang also raids in a second guild on Saturdays called Erudite. They raid like 4 hours a week, and they will sometimes get cutting edge depending on the tier. How are you feeling about it for like that kind of guild?
So it's actually a very interesting dynamic, this raid, because I think yes, the overall raid, even of these bosses in current state, with maximum item level and like the progressive nerf or buff to players, like I think these bosses will be a lot easier. I think maybe some mechanics will get slightly tuned down, but like numbers wise, I think everything will actually be easy. I think the weird problem with this raid is like there's just a huge jump in the raid. So like guilds are reaching like halfway through the raid, like guilds that like don't have their own progression curve, right? They're just like, I mean, sure, like I guess some guilds will like have wipes to Sickran and RShaman, and like won't get to Broodtwister or those bosses like anytime super soon. But there's like a lot of guilds that probably kill those bosses in like 1 week of their raid, and then they'll get to Broodtwister, and it's just like something crazy, and it's like that's like a boss like it a guild that gets there. It's like they're almost like too far in the raid. Like they got there too fast.
There are
and they need a little bit more gear.
There are 749 guilds on Broodtwister right now. That is basically pretty much all of the guilds that are going to get cutting edge this tier, more or less, are like on Broodtwister right now.
Yeah, it's almost a case like I think some guilds like or Blizzard like maybe tried to like make it so like some guilds got that. Like I feel like they tuned the last bit definitely for like let's make these really hard for the race to world first guilds. But so they tuned them for that, but then they kind of messed up with making like boss 3 and 4 maybe a little too easy, so that even any guild could get to there, and then it's just like it's a mountain. It's just like a crazy mountain. Like you'd expect like maybe more guilds will like spend time progressing RShaman and Zekvir, but nope, they got over those. They were a little too easy, and then you're just on this Broodtwister wall, and they threw some nerfs at Broodtwister. I'm surprised they haven't touched Kai'Veza yet. That one is crazy, but I guess in a sense most guilds don't have to worry about Kai'Veza because you have Broodtwister hit you with still. So that's like kind of like what is supposed to happen. Like it's supposed to be a little medium wall before you get to the crazy stuff. So like you won't have to worry about the Kai'Veza tuning because you got Broodtwister, but like RShaman didn't stop people from getting the Broodtwister. So
are there any just like gut reaction nerfs that you would hit any of these bosses with that you think would help?
I think there's like small nerfs that you could do, like still the Broodtwister, like increase the time for like the debuff to like the egg breaks, like give you more time to do that, having to do that like coordinated. Maybe even making it a world where you only need 1 debuff to hit the eggs to actually break them still. Like you can go to that, just make it very mechanically a lot easier in comparison to obviously RShaman and the other bosses beforehand. Kai'Veza needs a large just overall damage output nerf, and obviously the health on that thing has to be like cut down. But like again, hard to say because there's a lot of gear to be had by everyone. So like DPS check on that could, when people are supposed to get there, gear could be a lot higher. So, having more gear, more damage, loss could potentially become very easy. With just gear, and then so it's like hard to say because I wouldn't know like as a casual guild, if you get to these bosses, like what is like just the crazy thing that like Silken Court. There's definitely a lot of like weird potential like like having to mechanically dance around, like not being able to hit the other people, but you got to like move around and stop the boss. Silken Court's definitely a boss that like doesn't really get that much easier with gear, whereas Kai'Veza would. And then obviously Queen Ansurek has, well, when people get there, it'll be won't have to be worrying about the DPS check on that boss, and you can maybe play like a little more safer in terms of comp and living. So I would say like the crazy thing about Ansurek is I don't know how people that don't stack like root breaks are going to kill that boss. That's like a mechanic that has to be looked at for sure. Because you literally have root spawn and then 3 seconds later reactive toxin going out and web blades, and it's like you just have to AoE your entire raid out every 30 seconds. And it's just like, how are you supposed to do that?
Yeah.
Even with like 20 more item levels?
Yeah, I'm really wondering how the tuning is going to go. So our guild specifically is like right in that mark of like a cutting edge guild that can kill those bosses easily, but we have like either a lot of pulls ahead of us or hoping nerfs for the future bosses. And we actually did splits this week in Mythic. So we did all 4 bosses the first week, and then in the second week we split the raid into 2 groups of 10 and just cleared the first 4 bosses twice instead of even bothering to pull Broodtwister. And yeah, I don't know. I think we'll have to see. I'm kind of wondering what Blizzard does with it, because like you said, it's hard to know. There is a lot of item level to gain if they, and also the stacking like raid buff severed strands thing that they talked about. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how Blizzard's going to handle it. I'm definitely interested to see. I'm leaning towards the side of hoping for nerfs for us normal guilds out there, because a lot of people say like, oh, Liquid is under geared, or they reach the boss very early and will have more gear. But it's like, yeah, also every single one of their players is insane, and they're probably doing more damage with that gear than most of our players will do with full gear anyway. So I don't know if how these DPS checks are gonna look for us.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to take a couple more. I think Broodtwister will for sure, because of how easy it is to get to that boss. I think that boss will have to get like a larger nerfs on that one, and then once more like casual guilders start poking at Kaiveza a little bit, they'll maybe adjust. Like, is it a couple more resets of gear? Is that boss just falling over for everyone, or is it just need a little bit of nerf for just like any guild that would like the sixth boss in Mythic? So it's like a aggressive thing. Also, I guess there's an arbitrary order here where it's Broodtwister and then Kaiveza, where I mean guilds could just go to Kaiveza, and like I guess you would have to think about it. Like
that would be like a decision that could be made. Yeah,
that is a decision that people can make.
Any other thoughts?
I actually have a couple more questions
Okay.
to move on from tuning. We got a guest appearance from THD as well in the background a little bit ago. I think everybody saw the big THD play with grabbing the essence or the thing or whatever. Do you have any like other plays that happened throughout Prog that maybe people didn't notice as much, or any sort of unsung heroes or like people that you want to shout out that you think didn't get enough credit or recognition throughout the tier?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that just in general, like there's a lot of people that on the roster that were insane players. Like and everyone played good, amazing, and you can only have 20 people in a raid, so it's just like it's kind of hard to like say like point one thing out, because I think everyone did their own things. There's definitely a lot of polls that were saved by multiple people. I think I'm trying to remember. I think I had like a crazy save on our Silken Court that's unsung about like we're all running out to the middle of the room trying to stop the charge, but there's this like one orb just like right next to the boss. It's like, oh, if this orb blows up, it could kill like anyone at 2 stacks. And I remember I soaked that orb at the very tip of like breaking my web from like stopping the charge that was like happening, and then making it back in time. So I mean, there's like a lot of small things that sure has happened for everyone. And again, everyone did insane, crazy plays for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. And what is sort of the environment like in when you have like, so most people when they go into a raid, they're sort of just like in charge of their own sort of thing and like figuring out how to play their class or whatever. What is it like to like you have somebody who's sort of guiding you and like overall people that are giving you strategy? How much like input do you have in like, your cooldown timings and your positioning? And what's it like maybe, you mentioned like having a really weird deep breath or whatever when you think things could be better? Like, do you try and speak up right away if there are like, hey, let's not waste any time on this? Or do you try and just like really make it work? I guess like maybe give some insight on what it's like to have sort of like a team above you and like strategy people and people sitting on the bench like helping you. Like, what's that sort of like?
There's definitely having like obviously multiple people in the same class and talking to each other about like just all sorts of things, but also like often we'll have the analysts, the people just look at the logs. They'll even go around to like every class like group, essentially like every class, and be like, if you guys are doing like different things from each other, like that's good. And then like they kind of like encourage you to like, oh, make sure that like you tell your friend, or like talk about it. Like what, like if they see like 2 evokers like doing a different opener, and then like you know Lummel will step in and be like, hey, you guys are doing like different openers, like which one's better, and encourage you to like talk about it and really think about it. And so like the analysts definitely come in and encourage like making sure that you're doing the optimal thing, but you're doing obviously try different things, but when you're do the end thing at the same thing at the end. And just obviously there's a lot of ideas that you just can bounce around. There's a lot of people that look into it for sure.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's super interesting. And I guess one final question for me then: what's the celebration like? Do you have anything that everyone did right away after you guys won? Any plans going forward? What's the aftermath of the winning the race to world first like?
Also, did you get the mount? That's also very important. Did you
No,
get the
I
mount?
didn't.
And more important question.
No, I did not get the mount. It is unfortunately not mine. I don't think I've ever looted the mount yet on the first kill yet. Like at least by myself, but it'll come. The after celebrations are kind of funny because during the race, you kind of stay to a nice sleep schedule. Make sure you wake up good time, go to bed. But the moment, the night we killed it, which was kind of late in our day, like it was near the end of the day that we killed it, and then just the whole maintain good schedule, just immediate degen to any sleep schedule just goes out the window. We just stay up all night and we talked. Like I had a lot of just fun talks. Then the next day there was a party. Like just they were party. Everyone. I don't like getting drunk. I'm not a big party goer, so I kind of like stuck around to say hi and whatnot and be around. But a lot of people started getting drunk in the
All right,
place
we
and
don't
just
have
having
to
a good
name any
time.
names. We'll let them remain anonymous.
Yeah.
So we got some partiers in the Liquid team.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
You could probably guess who.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much all I had for you. Thank you so much for joining us and answering all of our stuff. You were very well explained. I think it gives people a lot of insight. Unless Tettles or Squishy has any additional things they want to mention. Do you have any shout outs or anyone you want to give anything to? I guess shout out to people or.
Can we also get a fuck the potty C?
Why would I? No. 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 I'm just gonna definitely just shout out like all the players in the guild. They're all crazy. This is definitely the most satisfying victory to have, and I feel like everyone, like a lot of everyone got to play this rate. There's no one that obviously on the end boss specifically, some people had to sit, and some bosses took a lot longer than others, but everyone was very important. There's no one that was just like no one was left out. I feel like on this one.
Oh right. Oh yeah. And any socials or anything you want to shout out? Should people follow you on Twitch or Twitter or anything?
Yeah, I do stream on Twitch rarely, not that often, not every day. On the Twitch TV /Sanghelios WoW. And I also very rarely tweet, but I have a Twitter at Sanghelios Elite. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my socials. I'm not very active on socials.
Are you gonna do MDI or TGP
I do
this
love
season?
streaming. I do stream fun stuff, including Pokemon sometimes.
Are you doing MDI and TGP this season at all?
No, I think I don't want to. I want to take it easy this time. I didn't. Last time was like it was fun, but there's a lot of work that go into it, and it's so shortly after the raid that I kind of want to relax.
Right on. Well, awesome. Thanks for coming on. We won't take up any more of your time. We'll let you go relax and enjoy the Alienware facility. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave all the links to his socials and everything in the description. And awesome, man. I have nothing to say but thank you and congrats.
Thank you so much, Sang.
Yeah. Thanks, Sang.
All right, big shout out to Sang for taking time out of his day to come and yap with us a little bit. Also, shout out to the people in the background that were giving us the thumbs up. THD and Atlas and Goop, everybody walking around in the background. Now, talk about
that was a banger interview. Let me just say that was an absolute banger of an interview.
I love Sang.
Sang did a great job.
Yeah.
Who was it? Squishy or one of you guys suggested Sang? That was a great suggestion.
It was Squishy.
Thank you.
Squishy.
But yeah, Sang was awesome.
You and Sang have been friends for like years, right?
Yeah. He before Liquid, he was in Might. Before Might, he was on our server in Might's rival guild, Exiled Legion. That unfortunately died and then came over and then he moved off to Liquid. So
and he raids with you on Saturdays, yeah? Still?
Yeah, I think he'll be showing up there again. So that'll be fun.
Okay, let's talk about some of the Mythic Plus stuff. I don't know if you guys have been seeing comments about this, but I've seen some comments talking about the dungeon squish being a negative. I've also seen some people complaining about the scaling, particularly going from levels 9 to 10 and 11 to 12. I guess, Growl, you've probably been more in tune with this than most people, because I've just been farming weekly keys, trying to make sure I'm not falling even further behind with the gearing process. What have you been thinking about the scaling and like the dungeon levels in the squish so far, now that we actually have a couple of weeks of data?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here with the squish. I think they missed a little bit. Overall, I think the progression was still pretty good. For people who are saying that they don't like it, they may have gotten stuck on a place that they didn't necessarily want to. But I think Heroic in M0 was maybe slightly too easy, but I don't really think it was really supposed to be hard. The real jumps I think that are really nasty there's just like some really big key jumps, I guess, right? Because you mentioned 9 to 10 and 11 to 12, but another really nasty one that I think people will see is like 6 to 7
6 to
once
7?
that
Okay.
timer starts kicking in. And I think that there's like I like that the affixes don't impact the dungeons in terms of like doing weird stuff, except for the other ones that go away at 12. But I like that, but the jumps are really, really steep. It almost would have been interesting if they maybe smoothed out the jumps, like maybe death minus, 2 seconds, then 5, and then 10 or something like that.
Sure.
I think one big part though is just the difficulty in general of the keys. One big thing that everyone's fiending for right now is weekly 10s, which you need for your vault to get a myth track, and then also just doing 9s in general to get those gilded crests. And I think a lot of people who aren't like quite title range players who are trying, it's really tough to gear up out there. There's so few tanks and healers a little bit too, in that it's so hard to be pugging as a DPS, and like you very infrequently get into these 9 keys and these 10 keys and then you deplete them because they're so hard. And it's like, it's really, really tough to get gear out there. And before, I don't remember the exact scaling in Dragonflight, but you could sort of get by with not spamming 10 or 9s and then weekly 10s. Like right now, if you don't do a weekly 10, you don't get myth track.
Which
before,
that is
you
so
would need
bad.
to do,
Yeah.
you would need to do 20s for your portal and stuff, and for the max reward. But you could do, I don't remember what it was, if it was an 8 or a 9, and you could still get that myth track item and you wouldn't feel so bad. But now it's like you get a hero track item, which is, now that crests are so plentiful, it's basically the same as an end of dungeon drop, right? Maybe you save a little bit, or maybe but to get a weekly 9 does almost nothing for you. And
Are
you need
crests-
a 10 or nothing on your characters.
Are
And I was
crests
kind
plentiful?
of
Is that true?
sorry, what?
Are crests plentiful? Is that true?
Maybe not gilded, I guess, but all the other. I mean, I'm mostly 619 on all my guys that I'm playing. So not looking. Gilded crests are hard to get. When I said plentiful, I guess the cap is high, and you can upgrade a lot of different things. Like, I guess the reward of getting a max hero track item out of your vault doesn't really feel like anything. Like, I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm saving 30 crests on this guy. Like, for any character that isn't doing 10s right now, like either it's an alt and you don't care that much, or like if you're main and you're progging up, it really feels to not get that myth piece.
Yeah. It almost feels like this entire season is designed to be harder in a way. Like, you think about it, the 7 affix, it comes in right when end of dungeon rewards drop hero pieces. That doesn't seem by accident. And 9s is a huge step up from the 6s for the top end crests. Like, and then 10s is the last affix where you get the myth track. It feels like they wanted to give Mythic Plus more of a stepping stone with the rewards, because in previous seasons, you kind of just jumped a good chunk of the low end. Especially for players, like us at the higher end. Whereas now it feels like they want there to be more of a progression where you start with the lower keys, you slowly work your way up, but a lot of people aren't used to that, and they're expecting to jump straight into a 9 key and get their Gilded Crest, but that might not be where they, belong right now, and it takes time to learn the dungeons, get their gear up before they can actually get into these keys. It was kind of a similar thing with Delves, where, players with more skill could complete the tier 8 Delves at 580 item level. But for people without, with less skill, you kind of needed to gear up a little more. And it feels like they designed the season to be harder, which, both has positive and negative aspects to it.
I think
Yeah.
coordination too is a big thing. And one thing that Blizzard hasn't been shy about in their design or talking about things is they want you to be in a group. They want you to make friends. They want you to have a guild. And so for the people that I think are struggling the most right now, these are the people who are out on the streets just like pugging, playing mostly as a solo player. Because if you do, a couple 9 keys and you deplete them and you're playing with your guild or your friends, you learn, right? You're like, okay, that pack was really hard. Okay, we can't pull this, And over the course of a few days, you start to, okay, we can do this, Whereas in a pug, you might just wipe and have the same thing kill you 10 times in a row in the same key, and it's just like. And again, I think what Squishy mentioned too is like it's definitely by design. They want it to be hard. They want you to go, look, these 9 keys are really tough to pug. I need to find friends to play with. I need to find a guild. Like I need to get into a mythic guild to get this loot. I think there's a lot of players that buck against that trend just because it's hard. It's hard to have a team, especially with schedules and stuff like that. Not team, I guess, but at least like a network of people to play with. But it is true that you enjoy the game so much more when you have those people to play with. Like Tettles mentioned, like, yeah, I've just been, playing with buds and 10 keys and farming crests. And while it's, not easy for him, it's like, he can still get all the stuff he needs, craft all of his weapons, do a weekly on his all that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like, for me, it was one of those things that I started out this season like a few days late because I was like so busy with the race world first. And then I just got into a group with like Trell and Toll and Luigi and whatnot, like, very high end players. And then it's like, we're all under geared, but we're still timing these dungeons on a 10. But then anytime I try to pug it, it's like the first pull of Stone Vault like chain wipes us, and I know that we're never timing this key, and I'm just like, wow, this is brutal. I don't know. I think that it's really hard out there for people who are trying to just like pug keys, no voice, no coordination, no comms. I feel like it has got to be tough. I will say though, in terms of the dungeon squish, I do like the fact that I'm seeing more representative level of keys like shown in the group finder, where if you feel like you are that level that is like able to do a 4, there's actually 4s in the group finder, whereas before, like, that would be a 14, but then there's like 13 other key levels below that probably wouldn't be shown that often in the group finder. And I do think that the squish is good in that regard, because I feel like there's just like fewer key levels to even be able to go through, which means that people are able to get something that's more representative of their skill.
So sorry, go ahead.
I don't even know how much easier these dungeons are going to get. Obviously, killing things faster is obviously going to help, but a lot of the things that cause you to die in these dungeons, gaining another 20% more stamina,
well,
it might not help you too much when the box runs over you.
It depends on your item level, because if you go from 11 to 12, your tank is tanky, and then if you go to
11 to 12 is a whole nother subject.
If you go to 11 to 12, your tank is getting auto attacked to death by white swings.
Yeah, but if there was a time to make this change, it was all at once. People are going to have to, or needed to get used to the, a 17 is now a 7. At the start of a season, hopping to a 7 is not the same as it was previously. You should be in M0 or a 2 or something like that.
I actually think you're spot on, actually, with that. Yeah.
But people, getting used to that, in their framing, like doing a 7 now is very hard. Versus, a 2, that's not, like the thing that you kind of face roll while you're drunk or something like that. A 2 is kind of a step up. It's the entry level to Mythic Plus, the new affixes and stuff like that. So it's a pretty big mentality shift. And that, I think, was good to do at the same time as a reward shift, because people are not getting the same rewards as they once got. Things are harder now. You have to do higher keystones to get those crests, to get the higher track gear. So it's a lot changing. And I think after this season, people will, be more okay with it. But it is a pretty big mentality shift for a lot of players.
What do you guys think about the fact, this has been brought up to me a couple times, that so previously there are people who maybe don't do 10s but are sort of sitting in those middle ranks. Now it feels like if you don't want to do M+, you don't have to, right? Like you could go into Delves and get hero track map gear. You can get weekly 616 gear from Delves. It feels like unless your goal is to get up to those 10s, and there's a huge chunk of the player base that's never going to touch those, and they know they're never going to touch those, you almost feel like why even go into the dungeons at this point, right? Like if you don't want to be in Mythic Plus, you don't have to be in Mythic Plus. And I kind of wonder how you guys feel about if that's a good thing, if it's a bad thing, and also how do you think it changes the sort of people that you get in Mythic Plus? You know, like I think around that area of like 7s to 9s where a lot of people are really struggling, it sort of sucks. But I'd be interested. I bet like the 2s to 6s might actually be kind of chill in that, you know, you don't have these like angry people that don't want to be there gearing up their characters.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you don't want to be there, you just don't do M+.
I think my gut reaction is that it's probably positive in the long term, right? I think that something that Blizzard has done is like, if you don't want to play World of Warcraft, like you don't have to like log off and like come back next season if you're not really feeling it. Which is obviously not great for us because we all love World of Warcraft and our creators in one way or the other. But like in general, I think that it's like Blizzard has decided that the content is going to stand on its own, and they want you to be doing Mythic Plus because you want to be doing Mythic Plus, not because you're feeling forced to, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so in that way, I actually do think it's good. I think that I've seen some comments, though, that some people are like, I actually want to be doing dungeons, but +2 is actually too hard for me, which I think that might be a bit rough, but I don't know.
I think overall it is a positive, though.
Yeah,
like
I kind of agree.
You have people who, I guess, like it depends on what your goal is. You know, for a lot of people that in our circles, these people are after the rewards and the path to get those rewards. For a long time, that was Mythic Plus. But now that pathway, if you're in that zone to get that Hero Trek gear, the fastest and easiest way is through Delves. And that's, you know, perfectly reasonable. But there are a lot of people out there, and I know some of them, who want to group up with their friends or group up with people and have a cooperative experience and really just enjoy dungeons. And for them, the 2 to 6 range accomplishes exactly that still. It's also a good learning ground to, you know, push up and kind of get better in a dungeon because delves are very, very different than dungeon content. But I think it still serves a very good purpose for the people that enjoy group content.
I think I don't think delves are particularly like the most interesting content, but I do think that they're good for the people that they're supposed to serve. I think that I think that the main goal of delves in the future should be like, you know, make them more fun, make them more interesting. But I do think it's like a good bridge between, you know, M0 and delves are, in my opinion, about the same level of difficulty. But I think that it's like a pretty good bridge, all things considered.
Oh yeah, I mean we can't go an episode without talking about delves. I think again, I actually am pleasantly surprised. You know, it was a little better than I thought it would be, and the challenge was a little better than I thought it would be. But yeah, I think just the big thing is the whole classlessness and the rollnessness aspect, and I just want to see. And again, maybe it's like LOL healer take, but I want to see more sort of like scenarios and things where it feels like you're playing a healer and you're doing stuff, and it feels like you're playing a tank, and like. Same with DPS too, right? Like if you're a DPS and you're just like pulling one mob at a time and blowing all your cooldowns with your personal, like that's not really that fun. Like that's not what a DPS does, you know? Like try and, you know, something closer to follower dungeons, but you know, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. But I think I like the fact that you can do gear up and get stuff like, for instance, me, I have a lot of healers that I maintained, and then like now that M+ is out, I don't have enough time, and also the content's pretty hard, but like I can go into a delve and just do 2 bountiful delves and just like knock 2 out on my like, you know, druid or whatever that I'm not playing, and I get a 6/16 piece, and like I'll feel a lot. It just is like something fun for me to do that like doesn't really do anything in the long run, no, but like, you know. So I was pleasantly surprised with delves, but I just want to echo your statement that yeah, that's where I want to see them, is like really focus on making the scenarios cool and fun and like interesting, and not just feel like, you know, underground. Okay, it's a difficult one. All right, now you fight one mob at a time for 20 minutes.
Well, dude, I'm also doing like on my alt, so I'm not really maintaining my druid that much right now. I might in the future, but I'm not currently. But what I have been doing is I've been doing 8 delves on the +1 level just to get my box filled up so I can take a socket, so I can have something for the future.
All right, I didn't think of that one, but that's actually interesting.
That was the cook
that's better than nothing.
Well, it's better than nothing, right? It's something good for me long
actually.
term, and it's like if I want to play the druid in the future, at least I'll have these sockets that because the dude's like 600 item level or something like that. Like I could get him carried through 10s probably, but like I don't know. Nobody's doing like alt keys right now, so like whatever.
Yeah, here's Squishy's tip of the week then. So for the vault row, all
Okay.
right, there's the Zekvir boss in the Spider Zone. I don't know if you've ever attempted it, but once you complete a tier 8 delve with lives remaining, you unlock him. They recently nerfed him, and killing him grants you a tier 8 delve completion for the vault.
Oh.
So killing him on a 600 no tier character takes about 2 minutes.
Can I do that on my guy?
Yeah, it takes about 2 minutes. It's not hard. On my 615 mage with tier, it takes a minute. So if you want an 8, like all 3, you clear 8 delves, you can just hop into Zekvir's lair, clear it 8 times. It'll take less than 20 minutes. You have a full row of the vault.
All right, I'm gonna write that one down because then I'll actually be able to maybe take some heroic tier or something like that. But
It's very efficient.
Might still be
After the
taking
nerfs.
sockets. Not really sure.
But yeah, if you have any alts that are like kind of in that 600 item level range, like just have to kick, kill the ads, and he should fall over within 2 to 3 minutes.
Gotcha.
And you get your 616 gear. Which
While we're doing tip of the week, I have a Dratnos level tip of the week here. This is something that I learned today.
All right, let's
that's
hear it.
really good.
Okay, I'm listening.
So, and this might be public knowledge, but I just learned about this for the first time, and I know there's some computer science way to explain this. Maybe Squishy knows. So when you search for something in the auction house, it does like a weird partial string search. So let's say you have like 2 words that are like very long and annoying to type. You don't actually have to, like, normally you would think that you would have to fully type a word, right? You would, like, for instance, it's like, you know, Zekvir Thorn Talon, right? Well, you can just type like Zek space Thorn, and you can type the first partial of all of the words in your string instead of having to type out a really annoying word and find things like way quicker. Because if you go like, if you just, let's say you have like some really long annoying name for a reagent or whatever, you just type like the first 2 letters and then space, and then the first 2 letters and then space, and it like knows what you're trying to find. Did you guys know you can do that, or is that?
I did, and I love it.
Yeah.
I personally am very stupid, and I did not.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know. I literally just learned about it today. So it's actually, it's so handy because there's some words where, like, for instance, Algari, every single thing in the expansion is called Algari. So if you try and type that in, it's going to come up with everything. But if you just type AL space and then like a couple letters of what you're trying to find, it'll come up instantly with one result.
This is so good for me because I personally can't even spell the word restaurant. So
Yeah, I think the most common one I use is like enchant, and then like instead of typing enchant, I'll just type en like C, and then space, and then just the slot.
Oh,
the slot that I'm looking for. So
that's probably good tech.
Just ENBR and then just enchant bracer comes up.
Oh wow. Okay, I didn't even know it was like that. Okay, so just circling back a little bit to the dungeon scaling stuff. How have you guys felt about like the dungeons as a whole? Because I feel like some of these dungeons are quite easy. Like Arakara, for example, has like 14s done. And then I go and look at Grim Batol, and this dungeon is like hard stuck at a 12, and most people are like most people aren't even able to get close to timing a 12. What is up with the dungeon pool this season?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have noticed the biggest thing about the difficulty is the discrepancy of difficulty. Yep. They had this problem at the beginning of Dragonflight 2 with Shadow Moon Burial Grounds, you know, everyone wanting that key in Court of Stars, and then all the other Ruby Life Pools, dead key, -3 levels or whatever. And I think especially like we were talking about with like progression or coordination required, a dungeon like Miss, while it, you know, there are some stuff that hits hard, it's not easy to tank or anything, you know, there's no like our group needs to be in comms to handle this boss. It's all just sort of like straightforward with what you want to do. Obviously when you get high level, some stuff changes, and then you have stuff like Stone Vault where, like, you know, if someone doesn't know the very intricate mechanics of like how the orbs work to damage the shield, and does the healer want to break the spikes and all this stuff, like you may have just like a very, very terrible time. So I think that's the biggest problem to me, is like the discrepancy of not even really difficulty, right? Because it's more just like, sort of difficulty, but like the levels of coordination required for the dungeons. And that's a really, really tough one to fix, of like certain dungeons are really easy to pug and certain ones aren't. What's funny though is that from reading chat and streaming a lot, I've noticed that not everybody has the same opinion. You know, some people are like Necrotic Wake, yeah, great dungeon. Other people are like, no, 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 I'm not going anywhere near Necrotic Wake. Like, and it's kind of interesting to see. And also, like, I've heard people say, yeah, Stone Vault's like not even that hard because if you only do it as a 9, it's not tyrannical, and it's like, so maybe a little bit of the difficulty is made up, but. On the topic of 12 plus keys, man, I don't want to say I was wrong because they changed a lot of stuff, but it is just such a defensive raid buff Aug Evoker season.
Oh my god,
unless they do something about this.
I feel
the amount
like
of damage that goes out is so high. I did a key session. So two examples of very bad things that happen. Number one, people are inviting my augmentation evoker. That's how bad things are getting. Or people are asking me to aug. Secondly, I played with a guy who is like a super good player, tanks really high keys, like on the leaderboard if he wants to be, right? One of those sorts of guys. And we couldn't find an aug, so we're like, let's just like, do whatever. Let's just plug some keys. We'll just play some keys. And like almost every 12 that we go into, he's just getting absolutely brutalized on his tank. And he's just like, dude, I can't do this. Like, what is going on? Like, I literally just did keys this morning with an AUG and everything is fine. And now I'm questioning, like thinking about I'm playing the wrong character. He's like, I don't even know, can I even play this tank like without an AUG? And it's just like, oh man, it just I don't like this whole. And the thing is, if you look on the leaderboard, it's not quite apparent, but there's a lot of defensive buffs that are popping up. So we're seeing Druid Mark of the Wild might be important. We're seeing that in a lot of groups. We're seeing rogues with the like defensive reduced damage poison thing. We're seeing not a lot of priests or whatever, but it's like you're just seeing so many multiple stacking defensive classes and like raid buffs, and it's because it feels like you need everything to live, and whether it's a really tough tank check in a dungeon or a really tough healer check, like we're just doing a 12, even the easier dungeons like 12 or 13 miss, 2 of the stupid guardians in the maze, your tank is literally cycling through every cooldown on 2 trash mobs. And it's like the damage is just so high. And they had this problem in Dragonflight where the mob HP is like, if you, like, hypothetically, if you had a vulnerability, but you went through the dungeon 1 pack at a time, you would just time every key so easily. And then to the point where, like, but if you take damage and you have to worry about the damage that you take, like, you're just taking so much more damage relative to how much that you can deal out. And it's just like, it's just crazy, or relative to how much HP that you have. Sorry, and just everything is just so quickly. And again, maybe gear will fix this, but it just feels like we're going so into one-shot territory, so into just need Mark of the Wild, need AUG, need this, need that. It's like, oh, and I'm not really like I've actually heard an idea that when I heard it, I'm like, oh no, this is going to be true. I've heard a meta prediction that it's going to be double DK Aug Evoker is going to be the DPS
oh
meta.
My God,
because DKs are just invulnerable right now. AMS is insane. Death Strike can go through like almost all the group AoEs. And then you literally just have a Resto Shaman that just keeps him in the Aug alive, and then the tank. Well, and that's like, you bring either a Prot Warrior or a Bear for the raid buff. And then, I don't know. It's going to be rough out there if they don't make changes.
RShaman is also sick with the raid buff for the Frost Death Knights. Like,
oh, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And like Earthshield, like, I sort of like publicly said, hey, I really want to try Pres Evoker. I think this class is underrated. It's really good at healing. It does good damage. People just don't want to play with my Pres Evoker. Like, they're like, no Earthshield, no thanks. They're just like, every tank is like, they need every single little thing to survive right now.
Yeah.
A reminder that they tested this affix without the damage portion on beta.
Well,
and
it was fine. It was fine without the damage portion.
Everything was good. And they're like, nope.
The funny thing is, I think if this affix was just health, I think it would be fine. I think it'd be okay. That smooths up the damage progression.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees.
Add a little more health stuff, take away the affix, make it consistent. I think it would be okay. But yeah.
Dog, I'm rescuing my tank. I'm rescuing my fucking tank.
I've done that before too.
Like, what do you mean I'm rescuing my tank? Like, what is it even? I'm giving him a 20% health shield for like 1 auto attack because he's getting white swung to death.
The first boss of City of Threads brutalizes tank with that tank buster. Like, I've had to rescue my tank a couple times off that thing.
Man, but the scary part is like, I actually think with regards to HP pools and people's gearing, like in a week or two, I actually think all the way up to like 10s and 11s, it is 100% just bring the player, not the class. If somebody's a good player, if they do the mechanics, everything is going to be good. Like, you'd way rather prefer somebody who's good at their class than just a better class, like a mediocre reroll or whatever. As soon as you get to 12s, nope. And that's only us weirdos that are trying to do high keys for no reason because we have brain damage. And I don't know if Blizzard will care about us, or if, I think we might be stuck here in this, terrible raid buff world while everyone in plus 10s is like frolicking around and having fun with different classes and doing whatever they want. And then here's us just going into a key with 5 Aug Evokers and not knowing what else to do.
Yeah.
Like, back to the dungeon pool though, like, I think they've actually separated into 2 different tuning issues. One is the timer. With the death penalty, you are heavily incentivized to pull slow and not risky. And with longer timers, it's a lot easier to do that. Can you imagine if Arakara or Miss had like a tighter timer and you were forced to try to combine some of those packs? Like, it would be absolutely terrifying. Like pulling double Blood Guard in the second area of Arakara or something of that sort, or the last area in a single pull. Like, those pulls would get scary. But the problem is, or the reason that you don't, is the timer is just so generous that there's no reason to. You time by pulling 1 pack at a time. And the second thing is, obviously, if there's a wall boss or wall trash, a difficult trash, that just contributes heavily to, a roadblock. And there are some of those that are really, really bad right now in these super high-end keys. I think most of them are fine at 10s at this point, but for the top-end keys, yeah, there are some of those bosses.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10s are similar to what Growl said. Like, you can time a 10 with any combination of players. You were literally looking for like who was the best player that is signing up to this group and will not die. Deaths are by far the most punishing thing right now. 100%.
Yeah, I really want to echo that because I'm gonna make it liquid. That's what we gotta say now. That
oh, okay, good point.
I want to make this liquid. That I think what we're saying when you hear high key players chirp about raid buffs and AUG and stuff, while it's definitely true, if all things are equal, you'd prefer these things in better classes. When you're doing low keys, and I'm sure a lot of people know this, like, do the freaking mechanics and do everything right and you time the keys. And so, like, absolutely looking for the best players and not being as picky about what class you play is going to be how you work up the ladder and time those keys, like little things like, hey, I played with this guy before in this dungeon and I know he did it right. Or, hey, this guy's also in a mythic raiding guild, so I know he's at least, can do something and he's not some random, like, Fodom, the reroll guy. Like, just little things to, like, try and pick up on people's skills and networking, I think will really help your success in these keys.
Yeah, I got a tip for this week. The final tip that we have. So in Grim Batol, if you tank this dragon next to this fire that's over here that you see on screen, like right here, you can actually make him not summon an ad, or he'll summon 1 less ad because he's trying to summon it into the abyss. So you really want to tank the boss like in the corner over here. Pretty much it.
Can you do it with the wall? Do you know too? Like if you put it up next to the wall or whatever?
I'm not sure if you can do it up against the wall. I know that you can do it up
I feel
against
like
the
there's
abyss.
different weird spots. Yeah,
I've seen it on the wall once. There's a little cubby somewhere that you can put it in.
Yeah.
That it will only summon 1 ad. At the very least, if it summons 2, the ads will be in the cubby, so they're cleavable. So at minimum, like, it's a small benefit if it doesn't work, but opposite to where the boss is on the screen right now, there's a little cubby there.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, see, this boss is buggy AF, so yeah. You really don't want to be like hard focusing these spirits in general. Like, these ads are pretty obnoxious to try to like commit enough damage to kill off. So instead, you would rather summon 1 less. That would be optimal.
Yeah. The last thing I kind of wanted to ask is, we've seen our second Xalatath affix now.
Yeah.
It was the Orb Collection one. How did you guys feel like, how do you feel like this affix has gone?
I think that I have 2 different experiences. I play with people I know who play with the affix on beta, and it never contacts anything, and I just have mastery and leech all the time, and it's not that bad. Or I pug, and nobody tries to soak it, and the mobs get a 5 stack sometimes, and then we just wipe. I think it's okay. I don't think it's like great. I think that there were some weird bugs that were present at the very beginning, or not bugs, but unintended ways that the orbs were like going towards the last, like Vic Goth and Boralis, and like I think the last boss of Mists of Tyrannosaith's hitbox is just nuclear to actually soak them on. But in general, I think it's like fine-ish. I don't think it's great.
Growl?
So my opinion, I think, similar to Tettles in that it's very clear that when you have a group that's willing to move and can maximize their movement and coordinate, it helps a lot. I am on two sides of the fence here. So number one big problem is that it has these like nasty overlaps with situations where it feels like there's no counterplay. However, number one, I don't know if you guys have been noticing this, but it's very clear that they're trying to do something. Like specific bosses, orbs will like spawn in certain ways and they'll path certain ways. I'm trying to think of like very specific examples, but like, you know, I think they're really trying to make it so it just works on bosses. My initial suggestion was during the beta to just never have any of the affixes work on bosses so you don't have these nasty overlaps. Like, I guess the example I was thinking of is first boss Arakara, where like, you know, it gets weird with like the web puddles or whatever in the way where you need to like dive in, but it feels like it tries to not do that. Like it tries to spawn in certain directions and like, you know what I'm saying? Like, like, you'll notice like 10 of them will spawn on one half of the room or whatever. And it's like, but what I will say though, in the defense of like there being weird overlaps or whatever, it doesn't really feel like you wipe that often to it. Maybe it's just because again that you're playing with a good group, but it kind of feels like okay, the all the orbs went in, but like, all right, now just use everything on the next thing. You know, like okay, we know this is about to be bad. Like it's not like, for instance, I feel like with the old affixes, the way that things would work would be if the orb touches the mob, it just blows up, right? And it's like if the orb touches the mob, you're dead. But it does kind of feel like you have counterplay, right? It's like, oh no, you know, you're doing the first boss of Arakara and it just soaked 5 orbs. Okay, now slam every button and health potion. It's like, usually you live, like it doesn't feel like the affixes wipe you, even if it feels unfair. But maybe that's again because I'm playing with people who are using their brains, and I don't know what the pug experience is like.
They've also changed them a little bit. So from the beta until now, before, and I honestly also think this happened early on in the week before they implemented a hotfix that they didn't say anything about. The orbs would try to contact like the nearest mob, including mob summons, including trash you're in combat with, including literally fucking anything. And now it feels like it's less doing that, where it will like, you know, contact like a maggot on Tradova or something like that is 60 yards from the boss. And instead it tries to go towards the boss every single time. And so in that way, I think it's a little bit better, but it is obnoxious. I'm going to concede that I think it's pretty annoying sometimes, especially whenever you're like, well, how was I supposed to even soak that?
Go ahead.
This one feels a lot like quaking. Like it's fine maybe like 80% of the time, and then there's just really weird situations 20% of the time where it just like feels real bad. I think 10% per misstack is a little much. I could maybe turn that down a little, and I think it has a visual problem where early on in the week, before we knew this actually was damage done, because it was damage reduction on beta, it made the mobs take a lot less damage when you missed them.
Yes.
We didn't know it was damage done. There's no indication that the mob is about to screw you over. Like, maybe they, like, when the mob gets the buff, they can make the model grow in size a little, like, bolstering to make it seem like it's more powerful.
It kind of does. It does. It's not as noticeable, but I'm pretty sure it does, right? Like, it gets a little aura around it.
It has the blue aura, but
yeah,
like,
it's the same color that everything else in the game is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that blue, dark purple thing. Yeah, but I think I could see that, but yeah, there's a lot of situations where the orbs just feel unfair or really difficult to deal with. Like on the last boss, City of Threads, if the root's coming up, you have to go out and soak them early.
Oh yeah. One funny one was Arakara last boss. You know how you get the blob on you for like getting rooted or whatever? The blob was soaking the orbs. So the blob is on me and I can't grab the orbs because the blob is taking them. And I'm just like, okay, this doesn't seem very fair.
Like, I think of the 4, like we haven't seen 2 of them yet. I think of the 4, this is probably the one that I would like to see kind of like rotated out next season. I think it's kind of the weakest and the most problematic just due to too many weird situations. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I'd much prefer this affix than bolstering, sanguine, necrotic, bursting, like all those affixes that we had to deal with. So I'm happy with it. I think it could be better, but if they had to replace one, I think this would be it.
Yep, I think that's fair. Any final thoughts on the M+ scaling, or should we cut to Q&A?
I have a final thought, not on M plus scaling, but something that I'm shocked that we got this far and we haven't talked about this. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Dude, Method. Method was so close to Echo in killing the last boss.
Yeah.
Like that was Method actually had a crazy tier. Like I feel like they literally said it too at the start of, was it Shadowlands or Dragonlight when they started raiding? They're like, we know we're not going to be able to compete for Race World first, but if we stick together and we keep playing and keep doing this, like, dude, they're to the point now where like if they win a race, or like I feel like you're not putting them at like 1% or 0% anymore. Like and you have that competition from China as well coming up. Like I think it's an interesting thing that there's that much talent being created in EU right now, that there's enough, there's enough people to make, because that's the biggest problem in NA, right? Is Liquid sort of vacuums all the players of this quality, and now EU is big enough that there's enough of these just cracked players that are playing in these guilds. So yeah, I don't know. I think the untold story of this raid was how close Method was to Echo, because this was not this was a hard raid. Like it's not like it was kind of like a breeze raid where everyone just kind of cleared it quick and Method was a little bit behind. Like this was a hard raid where I think one expansion ago Echo would have diffed Method really badly.
I kind of wonder, and this is going to be difficult to...
All right, nobody wants to say anything good about Method.
Oh,
on to
no,
Q&A.
I was muted.
Oh, you were muted?
I was muted. I was going to say, it's kind of difficult for me to even be able to tell. Did Liquid absolutely just completely diff the fuck out of the field? Or was Echo playing not up to their normal standards? Because it normally feels like it's like a 2-horse race, and it might be a combination of both. I think it could be a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Liquid, I think, played their absolute asses off the entire tier, had shorter boss progression on pretty much every single boss from like in terms of like fight progress time, while also leading the entire time. So that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But Method, Method killing Queen Ansurek within a couple of hours of Echo is very interesting. I wonder what that's going to look like in the future. I wonder if Echo is going to bounce back and then kind of just diff the shit out of Method in the future, or if Method is the real deal. Because I think it's kind of difficult to tell right now as to like, is it Echo playing bad, or is it Method playing good? Is it Liquid like dominant, or is it Echo playing bad, or is it all of it combined, right?
Yeah, and Echo also had some other things happen, like now came in last minute, shaking up tank comp a little. Like,
there was
having to prep for that.
Zalia with the healer stuff.
I
think the tank thing is probably bigger than the healer thing, because the healer situations, oh, what a shame, Ryson has to play. Like, all right, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, this is a pretty heavy tank tier as well. Like, it wasn't. This is a pretty big step up from the normal tank tier. But in addition to Method, like on the Chinese realms, Hot Pot Hero coming in, like kind of like a step behind Method, but they kind of kept up as well in a way. Like having four teams keep up.
They start 36 hours behind everybody else, so they're going to be struggling sometimes. I do think they benefited heavily from the fact that they BOE farmed trash in splits for a while and have just an item level and a half over everybody else. I think it would be kind of foolish to not point that out, but yeah.
I think that's fair. But the other thing I was going to mention is, Growl, you mentioned that, all talent goes to Liquid for NA. I do think that's kind of a benefit for Liquid. All the talent going to one guild compared to having to split, all the talent between Echo and Method. It's being split up, so you may not have one super stacked roster, but two relatively well stacked rosters. So maybe that contributed as well to it as well.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, you definitely have to mention the elephant in the room, that they're playing for something a little bit different. Echo is playing for first, while they are also playing for first, like they're mainly playing to get their first step in the door and beat Liquid or Echo in a race. So I feel like when Liquid won, morale definitely had to have been low in the Echo camp, and the will to go through and really push out every hour probably went down. Whereas Method the whole time was like, we can beat these guys, let's do this, And I feel like there's definitely that sort of energy that happened with these guilds as well. But all I'm saying is I'm very excited to see future races. even though this is a little bit brutal of a tier, I think that the action of both Method and potentially a guild from China coming up could be really, really exciting. Because having a multi-horse race, like the Race World First is already so fun to watch when you have two guilds side by side, and having having a more and that many different strategies would be wild.
I think everybody hates a dynasty. Oh my gosh, that was music again. I think everybody hates a dynasty as well, and so like having more and more competition is like a huge deal. And I love the Race World First. I think it's so cool to watch. And if you are able to cultivate enough talent to be able to be competitive, that is huge. Because whenever you look at Liquid and Echo historically, those are the most accomplished guilds that can pay their players the most, that have all the success, right? So if you're like quite serious about wanting to go and be a Race World First competitor, you are kind of incentivized to only ever join Liquid or Echo in that regard. And so it's really difficult for them, for players to actually want to go to any other guild, because those guilds are playing the best and they have the most success long term. And like, so if you have the opportunity, you would always go to either Liquid or Echo.
I remember in Amir Jasil, we had Farak, and both guilds were side by side. Like, I remember I had both their streams up. Like,
that was cool.
One got to phase 3, watching that one. Oh, they wiped. All right, watching the other one. Like, could you imagine if we had 3 or 4 streams going simultaneously? Like, that would be so awesome to watch.
I think it's difficult to have enough talent to want to do that. Like,
absolutely,
or to have the ability to do that, because like, you think about the best players whenever they're ready to go raid in a World First guild. It's like, for at least for NA, it's Liquid or I'm staying in my previous guild, right? You're not going. There's no other option whenever you're looking to like actually go and raid World First. I mean, in theory, you could go and join Echo, but not many people from NA do that. Okay, let's jump to Q&A. This wasn't a Q&A question. This first one wasn't one that was submitted exactly to us, although I did DM them about it. Thune asked on Twitter, needed a Mythic Plus main to tell me why Shaman is leading by so much if it's not the damage/healing being so far ahead of the rest in dungeons. I assume it's because the spec has an absurd amount of mob control/utility, but then why was it not good in Dragonflight? None of this stuff changed. He also said, I DM'd him about this because I told him I was going to ask Growl about this on the show. He says, for the record, Shaman is very good. I just simply find it funny that it felt this good all of Dragonflight and was just as strong healing-wise, plus defensively for Resto, and now people suddenly realize it. Growl, you want to explain why Resto Shaman?
So to be fair, a lot of people played. So for really quickly, Shaman was like dog at the beginning of Dragonflight, and then it got buffed like 7 times in a row by the halfway of the mid-season.
Yeah.
And actually, I switched to it, and multiple people did switch to Shaman as their main from season 1. Eventually that changed. I mean, season 2 was HPAL. That was the most dominant ever healer's been, and then Resto Druid for the raid buffs. Keep in mind, Shaman got a raid buff now, so you're adding that on top of everything else. So a couple things here. Number one, I think Shaman is, while you have a lot of keybinds and utility, Shaman's like quite easy. It's very straightforward. It's a reactive healer. And so I think a lot of people went into the expansion, being whether or not you wanted to play an easy spec for beginners or you were advanced and you wanted to push high keys and play what you thought was the best. A lot of people sort of knew Shaman was good ahead of time, and it was, it's not really so much that all of these paladins and mistweavers are not able to do high keys. It's just that there's not really that many of them, right? A lot of the M+ people you always see this really heavy weight towards certain classes because of, well, that's just, people always want to move towards the best classes. I think the biggest ones that the other classes don't bring that Shaman does bring, I think Earthshield is great for a tank external for pugs. The fact that you don't have to worry about when to put it on or how to use it. You just slap it on the tank. It's always 5% DR all the time. I think tanks generally prefer having a Shaman there. There's lots of really nasty poison and curse dispels, and Shaman removes those, and I think only Druid also does on an 8-second cooldown, and Druid's healing was very, very weak going into the start of this expansion. I think Druid might end up being the Shaman where it gets buffed 7 times. Yeah, in general, it's just like all of the stuff that Shaman brings, but I do think that, I think... talking about some of the other healers that people are kind of wondering. So Disc Priest healing and damage is amazing. Disc blasts, and unlike previous versions of Disc, you're blasting the tank with a lot of healing too. You're not like short on spot healing. The problem is this just brings nothing. You have no kick, you have no curse dispel, you have no poison dispel. So if you have the option of both, you're kind of looking at a disc and being like, why the hell do I invite this? And tanks unfortunately rule the world. And so, tank is like, my healer has a kick, he dispels everything and has Earth Shield for me. Or this healer that heals me, but he does nothing. They sort of go towards that. Evoker, I think Prez is really good. I expected to see more Prez.
I agree.
Unfortunately, it's an Aug world for high keys, and people don't like playing two classes because you're really losing out on the raid buff potential there. Not having Wind Fury, whatever.
Just to step in a little bit,
Mistweaver, Paladin are both completely capable of healing the highest keys. They just sort of bring a little bit less than Shaman. I would say Mistweaver brings less on the utility and damage side. Paladin, I think, brings a little bit less on the throughput side, but overall, they're good enough to do the highest keys. And then I think, unfortunately, with Resto Druid and Holy Priest, they lack the group AoE burst healing necessary for some of these really high keys. And you can make it work if you have the right comp or coordination for it, but it's going to be a harder time to do that. And, no one wants to do the harder time.
Yeah, I will say, I think that, at least on the beta, and this is probably not true anymore, but on the beta, Prez, Evoker, and Resto Shaman were the only healers that had the HPS throughput to actually deal with some of the weird stuff that you're going to see at medium to high keys. Some of the HPS checks actually get pretty intense, and so the Prez and the Resto Shaman are the only class that had tools to deal with it. And just anecdotally, Resto Shaman just feels so much better to play with than a Preservation Evoker.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not even anything to do with the throughput. It's literally Resto Shaman's easier to play with, and so of course we're gonna play with something that's slightly easier.
Yeah, this is sort of why I say, while it is tanks and healer shortage, I think it's a lot more leaning towards tanks because I feel like a lot of healers are feeling it right now that people just want to play with Shaman, my priest is literally probably one of the most geared healers on the server right now. But I've been multiple times where people will be like, yo, where's your Shaman? Bring Shaman. Even though it's 7 item levels lower, it's just people just want the Shaman. So I think a lot of people are feeling that it's the demand for it. And unfortunately, throughput, and I've always been someone who says that throughput is the most important thing, but when throughput is equal, when you have all these different healers that can do the throughput, then they prefer the utility.
Also, Shaman players are giga chads and they kick on a 12-second cooldown, and no other healer ever presses their interrupt.
Actually,
dude, poor priests with their no kick, man. Poor priests. No, but in all seriousness, Shaman, I think the big thing that you hit on is this is a poison curse Dispo world. I don't think there's one disease, I think, in Siege of Borealis, but every poison, every curse is super nasty. And Shaman can do both. And Shaman can do 5 poisons every minute. So yeah.
All right, next question for Q&A. Working on egg prog, why in the world after the Fyrak intermission debacle did Blizzard not leverage some in-game solution for egg assignments? Something like having the debuff come out as 4 different colors could have quite simply eliminated the need for the weak aura assign. I'm going to tell a funny story. Something that was hilarious about this boss is that initially whenever this boss was created, that mechanic that you're talking about right there was originally private aura to the point where you actually couldn't interact with it with a weak aura at all, which begs the question, how would you have even dealt with that with it being private aura? Now, I don't know the answer to why it would have been private aura. Thank God that there's a weak aura for assigning it, because it is absolutely silly. And I think that whenever we heard from Sang earlier, he said that they could just add a couple of seconds onto this and help. But why doesn't Blizzard leverage something in game to change these color wise? Squishy, do you have any thoughts on this? This is crazy to me that they don't do something like this.
I've had it talk about this. I don't Morgan Day has talked about a mutual disarming of raid cooldowns. They could do a similar thing for raid assignments. You get this assignment, you have to go on top of this egg. It just tells you which egg is going to break. But I think they want to leave it so that the option is up to the guilds how they want to do it. Because it's not exactly fun for some people to be forced into that choice. There's some variance in how you want to break the eggs from group to group. Maybe your comp is better for AoE and does better in 20 target AoE with 3 sets of parasites. maybe your comp only does better with 10 because you're target capped. And I think that is an interesting decision that the devs want to consider. So I do think that it's gotten pretty bad, though. This stuff on Broodtwister, the weak auras, the ability to put down marks on the fly is super important this tier. And that's just like an additional complication that I think people want Blizzard to move away from. But I would like to see them try, because I know Final Fantasy does a very similar thing, where they kind of tell you above your head your marker, and you just deal with it. But in other news, Blizzard has announced nerfs for Mythic Broodtwister and Kaiveza on the weekly reset.
I knew that was going to happen. I'm so glad that you caught him.
Huh?
Yeah, so Tettles, you want to pull them up at the top there?
Yeah.
Growl, you want to read them out?
Heck
Hail.
yeah. All right. 1 minute ago, fresh blue post here. Oh my.
These are massive. What the
This
fuck?
is a slaughter. Woo! I get to do. Oh my. Yes. Oh yes. Yes. All right. I'll read them. Broodtwister Ovenex health reduced by 15% on mythic difficulty. This is huge because one of the big parts of this fight is that it's so mechanically demanding with the ads, and it's a tight check to kill the boss. And now, while the fight might be difficult with ads, you know, you'll be willing to make some sacrifices for us civilians. Experimental dosage duration increased to 8 seconds. That's the egg slaying thing, right? So they're giving you more time to figure out the egg thing. Poison burst cast time. This is the cast on the ad. It's increased. I think it was 3, so not a huge change there, but gives you a little bit more time.
This is
requires less
hard.
kicks.
This is hard whenever you have the 100% increased cast speed on this mob.
Oh,
right?
true. I didn't think about that. Yeah, you're right. So, oh wow, concoction periodic damage reduced by 30% in mythic difficulty. That was a huge healing check that required Preservation Evoker to press the engulf button on your raid. Increases movement speed of blood parasites less frequently, so you have more time to get away from them. Vial discharge damage reduced as well. I think that's the swirlies.
That's the swirly.
Awesome. So
I don't think that's enough, but fuck those swirlies.
Fuck those swirlies. Me and Squishy are very happy right now. Tettles is indifferent. He's just an M+ enjoyer. Nexus Princess Kaiveza. Health reduced by 10% on mythic difficulty. Also big. Chasmal Gash, is that the tank thing that people were cheesing? Yep. So that you can't one tank that fight anymore. Lots of damage reduced. I mean, I'm not going to read every one, but it's basically every single mechanic. The damage is reduced. This is notably their answer to Preservation Evoker right now. The damage output on these fights is so high, and it feels like guilds need to have those OP Pres Evokers. Now, look, if you want to be sweaty and play Pres Evoker and blast healing, then you can still do it. But if you're a guild that doesn't have one and you maybe are just more casual or you don't want to play it, you're going to be able to get through this fight now, very likely, both fights without having, Pres Evoker stack. And I don't know this. I haven't watched enough Silken Court to know what that means, but
yeah. So I have a feeling that maybe in like an hour after we stop recording, there's gonna be some Preservation Evoker.
No, please.
I have a feeling, but based on these nerfs.
Wait, I'm Broodtwister and I'm a Pres Evoker. Help me, chat. Help me in the comments. Or just type 07 because
when this goes live. When this goes live, you'll know. But I think these are great nerfs. Broodtwister should be a coordination check, not a DPS check. And I think these nerfs help out a lot. I think people will still run 2 times Blood Decay. I still think it'll be a requirement for this fight. But overall, like, this boss will die a lot earlier, that you maybe even just skip the Parasite Zone entirely.
Would you ever...
What if my split kills it tonight?
Oh my god, that would be
Maybe.
epic. Would you ever...
There's no way.
Would you ever 3-tank this fight now, Squishy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, okay, so one of the major issues is threat on this encounter, which is absolutely horrid. Because on certain sets, you have the tank debuff goes out, so they need to be topped or else you blow up the raid. 3 sets of big spiders need to be taunted. The other tank needs to taunt the boss to get it off the person that just got the tank debuff so they can remain topped. And you need to mass grip. So there's just a lot of tank stuff going on. I don't know how they expected tanks to pick up 3 big spiders at once plus taunt swap the boss. But I see a lot of guilds just doing an Agromar here, having 2 Blood Decays, one of which just doesn't tank the boss, period, and just grips. I think that will be a pretty common strategy going forwards.
I can buy that.
And then the Kybeza changes, these are very good changes because this fight was so much damage. As a reminder on this fight, probably not a well-known mechanic. If you hit 10% health, the boss tries to execute you after about like 0.5 seconds.
It's one
Oh,
server
yeah, I forgot
tick.
about that.
It'll execute
Oh,
you
it's
after
one server
one.
tick?
Yeah, so you can health pot if you're within the one server tick, but Liquid's like most of Liquid's deaths were to getting executed by the boss, for example.
Yeah. So realistically, this if you ever hit 10%, you just die on mythic difficulty. There is no saving you on mythic difficulty. So everybody's working with less health. And the charges on mythic difficulty hit for I think 5.5 million pre-personal, which is more health taking into account 10% than some of the classes in the raid. So all of this damage needed to come down.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the assassination is, the charge, and then the Queen's Bane is the dot that's also attached to the assassination charge.
No, assassination is the initial. Dropping the portals for the first time.
Oh, dude, I don't know why I thought that. But yeah, this Queen's Bane too is the dot that's attached to that dash too. And so it's one of those situations where it's like, if the dash itself didn't kill you, the Queen's Bane dot tick immediately after would kill you.
Yeah, the massacre is the charge.
Okay, so this is the Twilight Massacre? That makes sense.
Yeah. So these are the changes that they needed to do. Good job, Blizzard.
I thought that they were going to do these last week, like straight up. This is like, I am not shocked because you should not be able to one tank this fight. First off,
I agree.
10% health to avoid one tanking this thing. It seems like the correct like payoff in terms of like a damage check. But these yeah, this is all good. These are all good changes, I think.
Oh man, I'm so happy. Because I mean, I was genuinely, after Fyrak and after Tindril, how long they took to nerf those bosses, I was generally certain that there was Blizzard devs who just, after they get off work, they go to the bar, they get a couple beers, and they just pull up a laptop with our stream of our guild, and they just laugh as we blow up to Tindril seeds over and over all night, and then we finally kill it. The day after we kill it, they're like, all right, we'll nerf the boss now. So I was genuinely worried I was going to have another tier, and overall, maybe I'm biased here because I haven't done anything on that boss yet, but I think Blizzard handled it almost perfectly in the fact that they didn't mess with the raid too much. And while it was a little weird for people, this, it's not weird for that many people, right? Like there's only, this is a very specific set of guilds that are easily 4 of 8 and then not any of the other ones. And it's like, it wasn't really that bad. It was 1 week. Everyone kind of knew, what was going on. So if you didn't want to raid a lot of days or do VOE farms or whatever, you could do that. And yeah, I think this was handled very well.
Can you run this one by me, how you made this post while we're doing the podcast? Oh, Squishy, how did you make this post while we're doing the podcast? Can you run that one by me real quick?
By Squishy, wait a second. I saw him typing over there.
Remember when I was like, hey, Growl, want to read out these nerfs?
Yeah.
I was stalling for time.
All right, I think that we're gonna cut some of the Q&A. I think that this episode's been long enough.
Yeah, this was a banger. Shout out to Sang again, and I've been
shout out to Blizzard for the Broodtwister and Nexus
shout
Princess
out to
nerfs.
Blizzard. Shout out to my guild. Yeah. Shout out to you guys. If you're watching this in the time that the servers are down, or while you're waiting, or at work, and you haven't logged on to WoW, good luck in all of your weekly vaults as well. I might start saying that. I kind of like that bit, knowing our podcast upload time.
Yeah. Hopefully they don't nerf Growl's Prezo Evoker.
Yeah, it's whatever. I mean, I already told you. People want my shaman. People want my Aug. People do not want that dragon thing in their groups. So I'm not. It's whatever.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Peace.
Bye-bye.